Do you have students that seem bored to be in your history classes? Who find anything to distract themselves? Who have a vibrant personality but never channel it into learning? Who would prefer to take a nap than participate in your lecture? What if I told you there are ways to engage these students and turn them from being passive onlookers to active participants? It all begins with learning how to access one important tool: academic language. Academic language is the specific oral and written language used to communicate and express thought for a particular purpose. It is a complex language with a variety of content area knowledges that must be taught within the school setting. This can only be accomplished if students are supported and allowed many opportunities to develop their skills through numerous engaging activities. Mary Schleppergrell's research shows us that in order for a child to succeed in school, they must learn to use language in new ways to accomplish more challenging tasks. Schleppergrell refers to Michael Halliday's systematic functional linguistics framework to explain that relationships and language are formed in different situations. A child grows up in a home and community that uses a specific register, but when they get into school, they need to learn a new one. The register used in school has more complex sentences and a more elaborate vocabulary. This is hard for a child to develop on their own, but it can be formed because it is being learned in a new situation. It falls on the teacher to teach how to use the language most effectively. This is done by providing opportunities to develop an awareness of the school language and then practice it through engaging activities. It is vital for the child to learn the academic language so they can acquire and use the knowledge being presented to them. The best way the teacher can shape the academic language within the child is by recognizing and respecting the language sources the child is bringing from home. This is the foundation additional language development is built upon. This new language is what fuels academic thinking and processing. If students do not know the meaning behind a specific term or how to manipulate their oral or written language skills within the domain of history and social studies, they will not be able to effectively complete the academic tasks that are required of them. History teachers must consider the importance of academic language acquisition as they are planning how they will meet the Common Core State Standards. The history, social studies, and Common Core State Standards require students to manipulate language and deepen thinking in numerous ways. They must analyze, summarize, compare and contrast, cite, distinguish, reason, use, and make judgments throughout the discipline of history. Now that we know the importance of academic language and the role that it plays within the discipline, what are the top ways you as a history teacher can support your students? The first step is by critically analyzing texts. These are the texts you decide are worthy enough for your students to read in order to gain information. Understanding that events throughout history happen within a sequential order is important. It is often hard for students to remember information and if it is merely presented as facts and events. According to Mary Schleppergrell, Stacy Greer, and Sarah Taylor, the best practice in introducing a unit of study begins with creating guiding questions and a guiding thesis. This provides a drive for where the teacher is taking his or her class. After these objectives are decided, the teacher must take the time to critically analyze a variety of texts that they plan to expose students to throughout the unit. Many of the teachers will do this by reading primary documents, political cartoons, news articles, and watching documentaries on the topics. The teacher must then teach the students how to critically analyze the source of information. Many teachers make a point of teaching their students the importance of looking at what is being presented by the author and what is not, looking for who is being represented and who is not, and looking at the message the author sends their writing. The step number 2 is text selection. Once you have decided which texts are worthy enough, consider providing a wide variety to expose your students. One way of doing this is through a class-wide book club. Harvey Daniels presented in his excerpt Content Area Book Club the idea of having the students select a text based on a certain topic, and then having them discuss it with a group. An example of how to do this while learning about World War II would be to begin with the entire class reading the book, The Boy on the Wooden Box, and then to select another text from a variety of options for book clubs. You could select other memoirs or biographies written by or about others living through World War II that would provide a different perspective. Some options could include other biographies from a variety of perspectives, such as ones from the point of view of a Nazi soldier, a non-Jewish citizen living in Eastern Europe, an activist like Oskar Schindler, or a prisoner of war like Laura Hillenbrand's book Unbroken about Louis Zamperini. If these types of books are chosen, be sure to highlight the importance of paying attention to primary and secondary sources. Another idea would be to use fictional text based on the same time period. Some text ideas for this would include The Devil's Arithmetic by Jane Yolen, Number the Stars by Lois Lowry, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne, and I Survived the Nazi Invasion by Lauren Tarshis. With these texts, you will want to highlight the role historical fiction can play in understanding a time period. These options provide a way for students to look at primary or secondary sources and historical fiction. After your books have been read, divide them into discussion groups, with each member having read a different additional text. Within these groups, the students would compare Leon's life to the lives of the others mentioned in the novels, and they would compare the experiences of these people with what that you cover in a history textbook. Step number 3. Teach them how to recognize language patterns used in history texts. In their research, Mary Schlepper-Grell, Mariana Achugar, and Teresa Otiza stress the importance of not only critically thinking of a text and the viewpoints being presented, but the strategy of breaking sentences down into their grammatical features. There are numerous linguistic challenges in history textbooks. The researchers found that history textbooks tend to not establish a clear, explanatory presentation of what the topic at hand is. That they assume background knowledge from the target age student, and assume the students can make inferences about events and ideas without any assistance. History textbooks also make it difficult to keep track of the many facts presented, and the authors don't put themselves in the reader's position. The researchers state, "We found that students need to be able to work with text that is largely expository, focusing on how things are, by telling about and explaining ideas and events, with biographies and narratives supporting and complementing the exposition. By teaching students how to identify the events, participants, relationship between the events and participants, and the organizational form that was used through explicit grammar instruction, students will be able to better understand the information being presented to them." The researchers share that learning history requires much more than just reading the textbook. Students need to engage in a variety of activities, using both everyday language and academic language, if they are to gain control of the discourse through which history is told. Step number 4, provide authentic experiences. Creating authentic experiences for your students allow for them to learn what it's like to walk in the shoes of historical figures. Students will not become engaged or want to learn if they are not able to take ownership of their learning. One way a global history teacher has approached this is by providing projects that allow the students to go their own direction after they have met his requirements. At one point in his 2-year course, the students are asked to create a newspaper on a unit of study. They can take ownership of this assignment by extending their learning through including additional articles on the time period. For example, if they are asked to research the Great Depression, they can research sports teams, find recipes from the time, or include a fashion blurb. The students are able to further their learning through an avenue that interests them. Another assignment is to create a coat of arms during their medieval unit. Here they must research what is included in a coat of arms, create one that represents them, and then explain why they decided to include certain elements. A U.S. history teacher provides authentic experiences by having his students write essays from the point of view of someone who has lived through a certain event. For example, if they're learning about America's role in World War II, he would have his students write from the perspective of an American soldier fighting across sea. These are examples that engage the students in creative ways and encourage the students' interests. Number 5, get to know your students. It is hard to think of these unique learning experiences without knowing your students. There are many strategies to employ getting to know your students. Give an interest survey on the first week of school and then use these snapshots to start conversations with them individually. Stay on top of what interests teenagers. Read records of the backgrounds of these students, where they're coming from. Take time to talk to each of your students to get to know them and eavesdrop on their conversations. By setting aside time to get to know the students and their lives, teachers know how to create connections between the content and their lives. Step 6, make connections to the world. In their research, Christine Gritter, Scott Bears, and Robert Koss found an AP US history teacher who bridges historical content with knowledge of pop culture. If a student can make a connection, they are much more likely to embrace what they are studying and take an interest. Consider studying current events in class and make a point of highlighting the fact that what has happened in the past tends to repeat itself if it is not carefully studied and avoided. Connections can be made between past events and what is happening now, and past events with other earlier events. This allows students to see the cyclical effect. Step 7, chunk information. A great strategy to use is to chunk similar information together. This provides material connections that the students can build upon. Step 8, model through explicit teaching. Before students are released to begin an independent assignment, be sure to share your expectations. Students should have a clear understanding of the purpose of an assignment and the expectations for how to achieve success. Students cannot meet a target if they do not know how to accomplish a task. Take the time to model how historians read, think, and interact with the text as they work on a task. Explicitly teach the strategies historians use by going through the process with students. After this has been modeled and taught, allow students to put these strategies into practice. Having a clear goal set ahead of time, along with appropriate scaffolding according to student needs, allows students to not only reach it, but oftentimes go above and beyond the expectations. Number 9, support them with a plan of attack. It is hard to accomplish a task without a roadmap. This is especially difficult when given a written assignment. Some teachers provide support by having their students brainstorm with the entire class and then with their peers. Once a student has been given time to brainstorm, the teacher will conference with the student individually to form a plan of attack. Once the outline has been completed, it is turned into the teachers. They will then provide feedback that will give the students guidance as they tackle writing the essay. This leads to step 10, provide feedback. Feedback is key in allowing the students to know how they are meeting the requirements. It is important to provide positive feedback and constructive criticism so that students know what they did to make them successful as well as what they need to do better. After the final pieces have been submitted, some teachers will provide additional feedback and the chance for students to make revisions. This not only will help improve the students' grade, but more importantly, they will learn the content needed to be successful. Number 11, collaborate with peers. Another key practice is collaboration with peers. Students need to know how to interact with their peers and can deepen their thinking through conversation. As Relia Lent says, history is as alive as any subject could possibly be, and the discipline is supported, clarified, and expanded through talking and listening. Allowing for partnerships, group work, discussions, debates, simulations, and role-playing, students can expand their understanding of the discipline. As a teacher, you should model this by collaborating with your peers. The population of students changes within schools over time. Even if a school is primarily rural, on occasion there are individuals from other demographics entering the school and changing the makeup of a classroom. Poverty and multiple languages change the language background being brought into the school too. In order to best support the language needs of the students brought into a teacher's classroom, the teacher needs to be willing to work with other teachers. Working with others provides different perspectives and strategies that often one mind cannot come up with on its own. The public school system provides excellent support in both E&L teachers and consultant teachers. It is important to depend on the resources available to you to better meet the needs within your classroom. Step 12, continue to be a lifelong learner. Finally, the best practice a teacher can do to support academic language within the history classroom is to continue to be a lifelong learner. Take the time to expose yourself to new historical material through watching documentaries, news stations, TV specials, or commentaries. Listen to radio interviews and broadcasts. Read primary documents, biographies, and fiction and nonfiction historical texts. Attend collegial discussions. Take online courses. Subscribe to research articles. Or take in-service courses on topics that will challenge your practice and teaching methods. The best teachers are those that continue to push themselves as educators and strive for opportunities to challenge themselves as learners. The National Council of History Education, Teaching History, and the National Council for the Social Studies are organizations that provide many resources for professional support. These sites provide lesson plans, educator guides, best practices, links to additional resources, blogs, and conferences. There are many avenues educators can take to better themselves in their teaching practices and learn how to best support students in their language needs. In order for you to learn how to appropriately scaffold your students, you must take the time to learn. For many students, history seems like a vault that cannot be accessed because they do not understand the language. Although each teacher takes a different approach in accomplishing the task of supporting academic language in their students, there are 12 great teaching practices that can be implemented. By critically analyzing text, selecting a variety of texts, recognizing language patterns, providing authentic experiences, getting to know the students as individuals, making connections to the world today, chunking information, modeling, providing support in a student's plan of attack for a written response, providing feedback, collaborating with fellow educators, and continuing to be a lifelong learner, teachers can provide students with the keys to unlock this vault. Let's challenge ourselves by critiquing our practices and making changes to best guide our young historians as they tackle the world around them.